This is a story about World War II and Nazis, about a little girl who should not have had to think about jumping into ditches on the way to the train station because German artillery planes are plowing down everything in sight. It's about a mother who waits, almost too long, to save her children from an all too familiar horror. It will be this mother's second time watching helplessly as a foreign invader crosses over the border, seizing control of her country. Sounds like something out of a World War II newsreel or an old black and white film about the Nazi invasion of Belgium, right? The thing is, it's neither of those things. This is a story about my own family. The little girl is my mother. The mother is my grandmother. Even as I say the words, it's hard for me to get my head around. I mean, that's my mom, right? At the tender age of 7, she knew the Germans were bad news. She played with her brothers near the statue, the one her aunt had put there to remind everybody what happened the last time the Germans came through Belgium.
Oh, I got something else interesting to talk about.
Okay.
That's my mom, Therese. We're having lunch in an Indian restaurant. She's agreed to be recorded for this. I say, let's just get used to having this thing on and press the record button. Neither one of us have ever done or been interviewed before. We try to act normal. It takes a while, but then we forget that we're being taped. My mother begins telling me about this woman she met at a tavern near her house in Pittsburgh.
She's fluent in French if she's teaching French.
I hate to tell you this, but there are people who teach languages who are not as fluent as they could be.
So she's fluent in French?
Yeah. And
The woman, a high school French teacher, wants my mother to come and speak to her class. French is my mother's native tongue. She would tell them about being French and growing up in Belgium and France during World War II. We both comment on how it reminds us of the time she went to speak to a high school class at the request of one of my friends, Nancy.
you know, if I would, she wants me to talk to her
Oh,
kids.
just like Nancy Rolfe.
Yes.
Remember that?
I know. And my answer is, sounds familiar.
Huh.
Well, sounds that before. I said,
I remember how that single event made me take notice of my mother. I was 13, at an age when the last thing I wanted was to be associated with the two people who had been raising me all those years. And here was one of my best friends, wanting nothing more than to bring one of them in for show and tell. To tell you the truth, I was kind of annoyed by the whole thing. It was a high school history class, and my mother told them about what it was like to grow up during the war. I remember she got all dressed up, wore one of her Pendleton suits even. As I look back on it, I think I was jealous of the connection my mom made with Nancy, watching them walking into our house together, all bubbly and laughing over the incredible afternoon they just spent. The thing about it, though, it put my mother on my radar. I listened to Nancy tell me the stories of my own mother's childhood, as had been recanted to her high school history class that day. Stories I'd never been privy to. Whether my mother withheld them from me or I just never bothered to ask doesn't really matter. For the first time in my life, I was starting to know the legacy of my heritage and the truth about a reality I will never be able to fully grasp. And that is what it was like to be a 6-year-old little girl, afraid to go to the bathroom alone because she was afraid the Germans would come while she was in there.
Souvenir, j'ai allumé le feu, mes chagrins, mes plaisirs, je n'ai plus besoin de balayer mes amours avec leur trémolo, balayer pour toujours, je repars à zéro.
time in Belgium, the whole force of Nazi blitzkrieg had stormed across its neutral borders.
This is a clip from the 1943 newsreel/propaganda film Conquer and Divide.
River line, the anchor of which was Fort Ibanemayo, a modern and seemingly impregnable fortress. The Germans had secretly built a replica of the mighty fortress in Czechoslovakia and had rehearsed the attack until they knew every detail of the fort's construction and its every weakness. When the real attack came, it was foolproof. Parachute troops, dive bombers.
The film was produced by the United States Office on War Information, OWI for short. The OWI existed from 1942 to 1945. It was responsible for, among other things, selling the war to Americans and promoting patriotism.